You think a restaurant dies slowly, one bad year at a time? Bennigans didn't. One night the dining room was packed. The next morning the doors were locked. On a Tuesday in July 2008, thousands of employees showed up for their shifts and found a sign taped to the glass that read, "We are closed. Thank you. No warning, no last paycheck." 150 restaurants gone before lunch. You will discover how an Irish pub and a deep-fried sandwich became one of America's most recognizable chains, and how it vanished overnight in one of the most shocking collapses in restaurant history. And by the end, you will learn the cruel twist. The man who built Bennigans had already walked away years earlier to build something still thriving today. It all starts with a sandwich, so over the top, it was served covered in powdered sugar. This is the rise and fall of an American institution. How does a chain with 300 locations and a packed dining room die in a single night? Monday night, the dining rooms hummed with patrons. By Tuesday morning, the fryers were cold, the locks changed, and arriving employees stood stranded in the parking lot, staring at a taped sign on the glass, reading, "We are closed. Thank you." Thousands of staff had to explain to their families why their final paychecks were gone. It was a cold execution of a national brand. Yet the founder who engineered Bennigan's rise was not there to witness the slaughter. Norman Brinker had walked away decades earlier, leaving a corporate shell to rot. But before the lawyers stripped the bones, this Irish pub concept, famous for its deep-fried signature sandwich, spent 30 years as a national habit. How does a packed chain with hundreds of locations vanish between shifts? In 1966, a former Olympic equestrian named Norman Brinker opened a restaurant in Dallas called Steak and Ale. He designed the building to mimic a dim, Tudor-style English inn, offering middle-class families affordable steaks in a cozy atmosphere styled with leaded glass windows, dark wood, and mock fireplaces. To keep labor costs low and hungry diners occupied while waiting for their meals, Brinker introduced a self-serve, all-you-can-eat salad bar. This single innovation transformed American dining habits, establishing the operational blueprint for the modern casual restaurant industry. Brinker's rapidly expanding company functioned as an elite finishing school, training ambitious young managers who would eventually disperse to run almost every major national chain. He had successfully unlocked the formula for commercial dining, but the real test was who would inherit and scale this model once Brinker proved it worked. In 1976, Pillsbury backed Brinker to launch Bennigans in Atlanta, but the brand truly found its groove in 1977 with a massive new location in Tysons Corner, Virginia. The concept sat directly between a steakhouse, a neighborhood bar, and a family restaurant. It was a deliberate blur. This lack of a single, defined category gave Bennigans something far more valuable than a predictable menu. It gave the chain a distinct, social personality. The dining room became a theater of suburban life. People arrived for a meal, but they stayed for the energy, the crowd, and the feeling of belonging to a local club. It was a manufactured neighborhood pub, designed for a new generation of suburbanites who craved an escape from their quiet subdivisions. But as the crowds grew larger and the wait times longer, the owners had to figure out how to transform this vague social energy into a physical environment that people would pay to experience night after night. The physical anchor for this weekly ritual was a single, highly improbable menu item: the Monte Cristo. This was no ordinary sandwich. Kitchen staff layered turkey, ham, and Swiss cheese between white bread, dipped the entire assembly in batter, and plunged it directly into the deep fryer. It emerged hot and glistening, finished with a heavy dusting of powdered sugar and a side of tart raspberry preserves. The result tasted more like dessert than dinner. Millions of families made a habit of ordering this sweet and savory bomb, alongside plates of slow-cooked baby back ribs or death by chocolate, a towering mountain of ice cream, marshmallows, and candy bars on an Oreo crust. Bennigans successfully packaged pure indulgence as a neighborhood social event. Yet even the most dedicated culinary cult cannot sustain a massive restaurant system when the corporate foundation begins to fracture from within. The magic of Bennigans was not confined to the plate. It was baked into the physical room. During the 1980s, the chain perfected the Fern Bar aesthetic, wrapping guests in dark wood paneling, brass railings, and leafy hanging plants. Stained glass Tiffany lamps cast a warm, amber glow across brass fixtures and real antiques. It felt cozy. By 5 o'clock on a Friday, local professionals crowded the bar for happy hour. Come Sunday morning, those same bar stools gave way to multi-generational families fresh out of church pews. Alongside rivals like TGI Fridays and Ruby Tuesday, Bennigans became a staple of suburban social life. The room functioned as a stage for community connection, where the atmosphere itself was the primary product. But this theatrical design was easy to clone, and once competitors cracked the formula, Bennigans' unique gravity began to slip. Instead of slowing down, the brand scaled up. Bennigans began popping up across American suburban strips and major shopping corridors, anchoring retail zones with massive standalone brick boxes. Many of these structures spanned 8,000 to 10,000 square feet, designed as sprawling corporate halls built to process hundreds of hungry families and happy hour crowds every single hour. Inside, the intimate dark wood pub experience was industrialized, stamped out repeatedly, until the chain operated more than 300 locations across 14 countries. This rapid, massive footprint made Bennigans feel like a permanent, immovable fixture of suburban life. The expansion created an illusion of absolute permanence, as if the chain was simply too big and too established to ever break. But the entire global empire rested on a surprisingly fragile foundation. And just as the brand achieved its broadest physical reach, the man who shaped its very identity was preparing to walk away. In 1983, Norman Brinker walked out of Pillsbury. He did not leave alone. A mass exodus of top executives followed him out the door, stripping the company of the creative brain trust that had built Bennigans from a single Atlanta pub into a national habit. This departing team immediately bought Chili's, a little-known regional burger chain, and poured their operational instincts into building Bennigans' future rival. Back at corporate, Pillsbury executives continued to expand the brand, opening new locations as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Bennigans was growing larger, but it no longer had a champion at the top to protect its identity. The warm, wood-paneled taverns were now corporate assets managed by distant boardrooms. That leadership void left the brand defenseless when a massive British liquor conglomerate launched a hostile takeover of Pillsbury. A restaurant chain does not run on nostalgia alone. It requires a guardian. To the brand's new corporate parents, Bennigans was just a line item on a multi-billion-dollar balance sheet. They had no connection to the warm, amber glow of the dining rooms or the high-energy bar crowds. The real danger was no longer whether locals would show up for happy hour, but whether the people at the top actually understood what made the concept work. The trademark was now a corporate hand-me-down, and that is when the keys were handed to an owner who saw the entire empire as nothing more than a portfolio asset. In 1989, British liquor giant Grand Metropolitan acquired Pillsbury for $5.7 billion. But strict American laws prohibited companies from both distilling spirits and owning the venues that sold them. This legal wall forced the new owners to quickly divest the restaurant division. Bennigans was sold off, eventually landing in 1993 under Metro Media, a conglomerate controlled by billionaire John Klug. Klug did not manage Bennigans as a hospitality brand. Instead, he lumped the chain into a generic portfolio of restaurant assets alongside Ponderosa and Bonanza, two budget steakhouse brands. The Irish pub was now just a corporate logo on a spreadsheet, managed by boardroom executives who cared more about debt servicing than food quality. This cold focus on financial engineering starved the restaurants of the capital needed to survive, and that is when the physical dining rooms began to visibly decay. By the early 2000s, the suburban commercial strips Bennigans once dominated were overcrowded. Look-alike competitors flooded the market. Suddenly, consumers had Applebee's, Chili's, TGI Fridays, and dozens of near-identical neighborhood grills right next door. They all offered the same basic package: heavy menus, late-night bars, and cozy booths. Analysts noted that Bennigans had become a victim of its own success, copied so many times that its formula lost its edge. Without cash from Metro Media to pay for modern upgrades, the chain kept its aging layouts while rivals built sleek, updated dining rooms. The familiar dark wood and brass rails no longer stood out. Bennigans was slowly fading into the background. In casual dining, disappearing in plain sight is far more dangerous than simply falling out of style. While Chili's and Applebee's stripped away heavy woodwork to install brighter contemporary dining rooms, Bennigans stood completely still. The spaces did not feel nostalgic anymore. They felt dusty and neglected. Carpets wore thin, and the heavy, deep-fried menu increasingly alienated a new generation of health-conscious diners who wanted fresher, faster options. To 20-somethings in the early 2000s, the dim tavern looked like their parents' tired watering hole. Food quality slipped as cash-strapped kitchens cut corners to save pennies. Franchisees begged corporate headquarters for the money to remodel their deteriorating storefronts, but the parent company's coffers were empty. Being comfortably old-fashioned had ceased to be a marketing charm, transforming instead into a terminal business liability that was about to force a painful retreat. In 2006, the first cracks appeared quietly when Metro Media shuttered every Bennigans in New York State and pulled out of Connecticut. It was a silent retreat. But then, the 2008 financial crisis arrived, raising food and fuel costs while gutting the casual spending Bennigans depended on. Customers vanished. Metro Media Restaurant Group was already buried under a massive debt load, leaving them with no cash to upgrade aging locations or pay suppliers. S&A Restaurant Corporation, the corporate shell holding the debt, simply could not keep up. By June 2008, rumors of an impending collapse leaked, forcing corporate executives to issue a flat public denial, insisting they were not preparing for bankruptcy. The company claimed it was merely working on a standard debt restructuring plan to weather the economic storm. But behind closed doors, the ledger was bleeding and the cash had run out completely, which meant this public promise of safety was about to collide with a secret Midnight Directive. At exactly 11:47 p.m. on Monday, July 28, 2008, phones began ringing in the homes of Bennigans managers across the country. The message from corporate headquarters in Plano, Texas, was brief and absolute. Do not turn on the fryers, do not prep the line, and do not open the doors tomorrow morning. Instead, managers were instructed to print out a cold template reading, "We are closed. Thank you." S&A Restaurant Corp., the parent company, had run out of cash. There was simply no money left to pay the staff for the rest of the week. For employees like Steve, a waiter who had worked a packed dining room just 4 nights earlier on Thursday, the news was a sudden, devastating blow. He was out of a job with his final paycheck entirely vaporized. S&A Restaurant Corp. did not file for Chapter 11, bankruptcy to reorganize and buy time. They filed for Chapter 7, liquidation, an immediate surrender that meant the business was being dismantled to pay off creditors. With a single filing in the Eastern District of Texas, 150 company-owned Bennigans and every remaining steak and ale restaurant in America shut their doors on the exact same day, throwing 9,000 people out of work. It was the largest, most abrupt collapse the casual dining industry had ever seen. Yet because of a quirk in the chain's corporate structure, this sudden execution did not wipe the green and white logo off the map entirely. The Chapter 7 bankruptcy filing targeted only company-owned stores, leaving 138 independently owned franchise locations technically alive. But these survivors were suddenly stranded, without a corporate supply chain, forced to buy ingredients locally while carrying a brand name that had overnight become radioactive. Customers stayed away, spooked by news of the sudden collapse. One by one, these domestic holdouts quietly locked their doors and walked away. A few foreign outposts proved more resilient, including a cluster of more than 30 locations in South Korea that managed to cling to life until 2016. But back home, the sprawling green and white footprint continued to shrink toward a single-digit map. This left the remaining operators facing a stark question. Did the Bennigans name still hold enough value to justify keeping the sign on the building? Norman Brinker's operational model did not fail. It simply migrated. The executives who walked out of Bennigans in 1983 took those exact systems to Chili's, transforming it into a global powerhouse that still thrives today. While the founders' formula succeeded elsewhere, Bennigans itself became a corporate relic. In 2015, a husband and wife team bought the brand's remaining wreckage, attempting to revive the old magic. But with only a handful of traditional full-service locations left standing in America, the brand exists more as a ghost than a comeback. It is a scattered collection of dining rooms trying to capture a bygone era. This leaves a final, lingering question. Can a warm, suburban memory sustain a brand that no longer possesses its old, massive scale? Today, those mock Tudor brick buildings house local medical clinics or bank branches. But we lost more than brass railings and deep-fried Monte Cristos. We lost the default neighborhood living room. As physical connection points continue to shrink, we're left searching for where we gather next. What are your favorite memories of these suburban sanctuaries? Let us know in the comments.